Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest today. I talk to a lot of law enforcement people, and my guest today, I really wanted to get her on to talk to another aspect of the law enforcement life that I think the general public doesn't necessarily think about very much. And that's that aspect of being a spouse. And there's a whole lot to talk about when it comes to that. So I'm bringing in the expert, Rebecca Lynn from Proud Police Wife. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And I just want to thank you because I think sometimes the family spouses are overlooked a little bit. And so I think it's important that if we want to help the officers, we need to start including the family in those conversations too. So I'm excited to come on and talk.
Absolutely. And let's just throw it right out there.
Yeah.
It's not easy being married to a cop, is it?
No, not always. Definitely not. I mean, my husband has been in law enforcement for 20 years and we were high school sweethearts, before he went into law enforcement. And I had no idea. I absolutely had no idea what that would entail, how, our kind of family would just be impacted by his job. It's not everything, but it is a piece of it. And so it's important to have those conversations, I think. And yeah, it's not always easy.
And you mentioned something really important. So he wasn't a cop when you guys got together. And I think there's two distinctions there. When you start dating someone and then ultimately marrying them and they become a cop, and on the other side, when you start dating a cop and marry them, and now those are kind of two different worlds, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it would have been maybe a little bit different if we had been dating through that so I could get a taste of, okay, this is what the experience might be like. But I knew he wanted to be a police officer, but we went through, high school, college, and all those things. He had another, job before he went into the police academy. So, we had a different experience prior to that. And so that's when I kind of started initially seeing and questioning like, okay, are there resources out there for police families? Because I saw the difference in our relationship from when he first went in and then started seeing just changes like once he finished the academy into field training. And not all of it was bad, but it was just like, okay, we couldn't finish a conversation for 3 days sometimes. And I'm like, is this normal? And back then there was nothing out there. And so that bothered me, which we can talk more about, as we get going, but that's kind of what prompted Proud Police Wife was I couldn't find anything out there. And so I think too, if you're starting to date someone, and they're already a police officer, you get aspects of that. You get to see little pieces like, hey, oh, my plans changed again. We got to, reschedule, or I can't be there during that time. You get little tastes of that. So I'm sure both experiences are very unique. Obviously, I can only speak to the fact of, not having that in our life prior. But so yeah, definitely two different ends of the spectrum, I think.
Well, so let's talk about that. So here you are, a young police wife,
Yeah.
and you're looking for resources on how to do this. And you discovered there really wasn't much out there, right?
No, not at all. And this was again 20 years ago. So, I would Google things and I remember two articles that just talked about high divorce rates and don't marry a cop. That was it. That was what I found. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so my background was actually in teaching. I taught kindergarten at the time. And I just kind of always had it in my head where I was like, man, I want to help these families someday because we did just fine, but we still, went through different seasons where I'm like, this is really hard. And it would be like, okay, just adapting our own relationship to the schedule. And we used to be together all the time. Now we weren't. And so just, the normal things that we had to adapt to as a couple. But then you start having children. And then I would, get asked, oh, your husband's not able to join us again. And, like just little things that obviously in the grand scheme of life may not be a big deal, but when you're experiencing them the first time and it's new and you have no one else to talk to about it. Like I didn't know if this stuff was normal or not. And so I would look for things. There was nothing out there. And so finally, it was about 10 years into his career. After our second child was born, we decided I was going to stay home for just a year. And because, two kids in daycare and I was a teacher and he was a cop. And so I was like, okay, 2 year, you 1 year, I'm going to stay home. And then I was like, couldn't sit still. I'm just not a very, very good at, doing one thing. And so I like to be creative. So I'm like, it still bothers me that there's nothing out there. It's been 10 years and I'm still not seeing anything out there for families. And now we had adjusted a lot, but I saw families and new spouses come into his department and I saw the struggles they went through. And so of course this was very localized to like where we lived and wasn't seeing anything online still. So I said to my husband, look, I like to write. Are you okay with me sharing kind of about our life together and what our experience has been like as a police couple? And he was like, yeah, go for it. And so I started a website, and that's all it was like black and white website. Like I didn't know much, 10 years ago. And I wrote 4 articles and at the time, and the fourth article got picked up somehow by a Facebook police group and surprisingly was like very positive. I was kind of like, oh, when it goes out there to police officers, like, how's everybody going to think? But it had hundreds of thousands of views and so many comments, and people were like, keep talking, keep sharing this is helpful. And so that's kind of how it all began. And so I just kind of made it my mission. Now this is my full-time job, never went back to teaching. And I just kind of made it my mission to openly share what it is that we go through, what our experiences were, also to find resources that exist, because there are a lot of resources now. And a lot of times people have no idea where those are or that they even exist. And then I really want to try to just give that support and positivity. Not everything is bad. And it may just be different than what people are used to. Or maybe they don't have someone to talk to because they don't have anybody that knows this lifestyle or anything like that. So I try to just openly share and then share those resources so that people can get support.
My husband and I used to teach a class called Beyond Off Duty Survival. And it stemmed from, we had a class called Off Duty Survival, where it was just basically 4 hours of getting involved in shootings with your family. And
Right.
it was tactically, it was great, but it was kind of depressing, right? And the spouses were like, could you talk more about just, because he and I would say funny things on the side that people would relate to.
Right.
And so then we started talking about communication and things like that. And I know that that's some of the stuff that you talk about. You have become you're an influencer, right? I mean, you're
Right.
huge. You're all over social media. Your Instagram especially is phenomenal. And and that's the thing. Even though I've been 40 plus years in this profession, and I'm retired and my husband's retired, I still go to your Instagram and things just to see cool stuff and
Yeah.
it's very relatable. And I think now we're far more as a society aware of the things that not just law enforcement officers deal with, but what the spouses deal with. When I was in the academy, we were riding our covered wagons to patrol. We were told in the police academy, don't talk about the job at home. I mean, it was demanded. Don't take that stuff home to your family. How ridiculous was that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's mind blowing. And I get pieces of that in the sense of a lot of times officers want to protect their spouse from the trauma and the stuff that they see at work, and they don't want to share that. But we can't, help or support if we have no idea what's going on. And, I talk with a lot of spouses all the time about, yes, officers need that decompression time when they come home. And I share about things that my husband and I do. We do something called no question nights, where if I know he's had can I cuss, crazy ass day, then he's come home and it's insanity, and I will basically like. I kind of used to word vomit. He would come in the door and I'd be like, "Oh, I want to talk to you. I want to share all the things. I want to ask the questions, tell you about the kids." Well, guess what? That would kind of lead to almost like animosity, because he wasn't in the frame of mind to answer 1,000 more questions when he's already done that and made life or death situation or decisions all day long at work. Not that he didn't want to talk. He was just, his body was done and he was in that hypervigilant state and he just couldn't do it. So, like, we would have no question nights where, unless it was something that really needed to be answered that night, like for the next morning, we would just wait, and we would wait to the next morning, and conversations were way better because I got the outcome I wanted. He was much more open, ready to talk, and he was refreshed and able to answer. And but you don't know those things until you communicate and share about them. And I remember years and years ago, I had realized that things were like maybe a little different. And I even picked up on some of the things like his dark humor, because we would talk about things at the dinner table that I realize now that, or at the time, okay, we talked about something. And I remember another couple was with us who's not a law enforcement couple. And they were like, looking at us like, we don't talk about those things at the dinner table. And I'm like, we do. So I like, there's just little nuances that are different than kind of like the normal 9 to 5 family or couple. And it's just nice to be able to know that, like, it's relatable with somebody else that's might be a police family, or you're just not alone. So when you mentioned Instagram, that's kind of a lot of what I share on there too, is just little things that we may all go through that other people don't understand, or don't get, or will never get, and that's okay.
I've often said, and I discovered this when I was training police officers and their spouses, that the only thing crustier and more cynical than a 30-year cop is a 30-year police wife. And because you kind of take on that
Yeah.
that cynicism, and that there's not much you can say to a 30-year police wife that will shock her either.
Yeah,
um
that's so true. So true. Nothing surprises me anymore.
exactly, and that does become uh when you socialize with other people,
Yeah.
which is interesting. In fact, people watching this, if you have cop friends and you're not in the law enforcement profession, you do kind of look at them sometimes, and because it is different. But I do think you need to have non-police friends, right?
Yes, and I was actually going to mention that because it's so important, I think, to remove that, to have, you have an identity and a life outside of law enforcement and outside of your spouse's career and all of that. And so what's funny is now this is my job, and I share about, our lifestyle, and I, you know, really work to find support and resources for police families. But at the end of the day, I close my phone. I don't talk about this. Like, this is not, you know what I mean? Like, yes, this is what I share about on social media and things like that. But like later, I'm going on a walk with a friend, not a police wife. We don't talk about it because you need that removal. I think it's very healthy. I think there is a time and place to have those law enforcement friends too, because I think for the officer especially, it's easier to talk with them sometimes. Like, you don't have to explain the job, but I think it's so important to have those other friends outside of, because, I realized early on too, while there are unique challenges that police couples can go through, this is not the only profession that's out there that deals with this. And so, I had a good friend whose husband was a pilot, and she dealt with similar things because her spouse was gone. Her spouse worked long hours. She was parenting without her spouse for days. I have friends that are military spouses. I have a friend that, is a manager of a, car department, sales department. But guess what? he works 6 out of 7 days a week and works really long hours. So like there's things about the jobs that overlap. While it may not all be the same, I find that if people don't understand, if they want to be friends with you, typically they try to understand. But there's so many other things to talk about in the world other than this profession and your spouse's profession.
What do you advise new police spouses, on how to deal with it? Because I see this, and I see this in some of the forums as well, where they got come home from the honeymoon, and then the police officer, primarily a guy, um, isn't around, and you are going to parties and activities, or you're sitting home alone, on Saturday night before you have kids.
Yeah.
And I remember being a young police, I was a cop, but I was also a police spouse. And where people would say, oh, here you are alone again. What's your advice for that situation?
I really think it's important to still live your life. Obviously, you need to still have, that time where you're making time for your family, your spouse, but you can't let that dictate everything about your life or you're going to have a lot of resentment, I think. I think it's really important. You need to keep your own hobbies. You need to keep your own, it can be mutual friends that you have with your spouse too, but keep your friends, see your family and do those things. I really tried to early on, the time that my husband was working, make that kind of like me time. I would go to dinner with my mom, or I would, do a hobby, or, just kind of sitting around waiting for them or feeling like, oh, I'm alone again. If that's the perspective we have, then I think that it's going to eat you alive. You have to continue to live your life. And then I think too is, we have to realize that we have to be a little flexible when it comes to the job in the sense of I didn't realize early on, and I was very naive, but I didn't realize early on that, like, okay, he said he got off at 5 a.m. I kind of thought he'd be home by 5:30, 5:45. Nope. But did I let that ruin my day? No. It's when they're working, I just kind of treat the days that my husband is working as all day he's working. Like, don't make a plan for like, okay, we'll try to do something in the evening, or we'll try to, I feel like it's way too hard to navigate around that, and it's easy to be let down. So I think just really protecting the time that your spouse is off and making sure that you protect that time as the at least, if you don't have kids yet, for example, it's just the two of you as a couple, protect that time for you time and time with being with family, but that time that your spouse is working, do something for yourself. Like you have to continue to live your life.
So there are, now and really for the last 10 years, we've really had this kind of media war
Yeah.
on cops, and we had the Michael Brown situation and everything that happened after that. Then we had the George Floyd situation. And again, I don't think that people think about, we how that affects our families.
Oh,
Um, what have you seen in the last 5 or 10 years, and what have you been advising other police spouses to do to deal with all that negativity?
yeah. So for the first part of your question, I think I saw a shift even the way when I would share online. It was before 2020, that's a big one. Before
Mhm.
2020, it was so positive and welcoming. And obviously most of my audience is first responder families. But, a lot of people would come across my, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, who was not. But it was always welcoming and positive. We support the police. And then it abruptly made a turn in 2020. And I got so much online harassment, but not from the police community, obviously, from the outside world. And anyone that kind of showed, at least from the spouses I talked to, and again, I talked to thousands of spouses a month, and they were all feeling it, whether they had a, public account or it was private. They would get messages from family, they would get messages from coworkers, and just with horrible disdain for law enforcement. And it was so difficult for thousands of spouses because They just felt like the world hated their spouse, and they were going off of not what they knew about that person, about their spouse, but what the media dictated. And so it's been very, very difficult. I feel like I'm still navigating that a little bit. I mean, it doesn't, I have very thick skin and I've been doing this a long time. So that kind of stuff doesn't bother me anymore. But for someone who is just going about their day and someone has something nasty to say about them, it can be pretty alarming. And so the advice that I have given many, many times is that's a reflection of them. We cannot control what people are going to say or do or how they perceive things. I think we really need to just pour into our own families and, continue to be supportive spouses and continue to just focus on our own relationships and live our lives. And still, I think we still, though, I know a lot of spouses have wanted to shy away from sharing publicly in support of police, or maybe it's not publicly, but little things like there was a nurse who had a thing that attached her badge. And I forget what
Mhm.
those things are called, but it was thin blue line. And so she's like, I don't feel like I can wear that to work anymore. And I know that's hard, and you do have to, have some sort of protection there for your own peace. But if you can, still share, because law
Yeah.
enforcement needs that. They need that support. And that is one thing that I personally refuse to stand down on, things that I believe in because somebody else doesn't like it. And so I think, I would encourage others to still do the same in a way that, aligns with them. But I think we really do have to just focus on our families because we can't control what's out there, but still try to find a balance of supporting police because we know that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope that everyone does that, right? Everyone. And we're seeing a kind of a bit of a resurgence. It's
Yes,
slow.
yes,
Um,
that too.
but
Yeah.
there's all the anti-ICE nonsense, and we're seeing a lot of people step up and say, no, we support ICE and all law enforcement. And in fact, when we talk about things like ICE, there is a safety element to what spouses have to think about, right? As far as because again, after the death of George Floyd, we saw a lot of doxing of law enforcement officers. We saw their families impacted. And is that something that you talk about in your online presence?
Yes, I do. And doxing has been a big, thing that I have shared as well. And I've, shared about a service that people can use to get their information offline too, because it's a problem. And people will, a lot of wives have come to me because they'll see like someone that, again, like a person that's not supportive of police or criminal, what have you, will see a police car out in public, take the picture or take a picture of the police car with the officer and post it in these public forums, and then a spouse is seeing this and then they're posting their addresses online. It's been absolutely horrible. So I've talked about that a lot because we have to protect ourselves, we have to protect our families. And I shared with you earlier, like I'm very open about not sharing my last name on the internet. My husband's job is my husband's job, and this is mine, and those are two separate things. And so I don't share my kids online. And we just have boundaries about that. And so I think as police families, we have to take that seriously. We have to take our privacy and our protection very seriously. That's going to look different for everybody, but I think it's really important to look into those things because you can't trust everybody.
And that service that you recommend, would that be officer privacy?
Yes, it is. Yes, I love Pete from Officer Privacy. I have known him for 8 years now, and he's phenomenal.
Is the
My husband,
best.
yes, wasn't sure. I'm like, can I say that? But yes, he's wonderful. My husband and I have used his service for 8 years now, and I actually just got an email. I think it was yesterday morning that our names were taken off of another website, and it just gives so much peace of mind, and I highly recommend.
Awesome. Officer, Google it, officer privacy. I think it's officerprivacy.com.
Yes.
But he's got a great Instagram presence as well, online presence. Um, absolutely, because that doxing is a huge concern, and you don't know when you're going to need that kind of protection, because again, as a law enforcement officer, you might get involved in a shooting next week that is deemed controversial by the media, and all of a sudden, your family's at risk. So if they can't find your family, that's huge.
Yeah.
So you not only have this great online presence, these phenomenal articles, things like that, you also actually do a conference.
Yes, yes. So I do a 100% virtual
I
conference. And
love that.
so, yes, so we are embarking on our eighth annual Police Wife Conference presented by Galls. It starts April 20th, so super soon. It is 5 days and it's all online. So back when I started Proud Police Wife, one of my frustrations was I felt like there were great speakers out there, there were great organizations putting things together, but I felt like there were things that prohibited people from being able to get those resources, whether it be cost or travel or time off work or childcare. And so I really wanted to eliminate those things because we know it's hard enough for a police officer to get off, but for the spouse to get off
Oh yeah.
too. And it's like playing Jenga. So I was like, no, we're going to eliminate as much of that as we can. So I came up with the annual Police Wife Conference. So it's 5 days. General admission pass is absolutely free. We have incredible sponsors that help us, put this together so that we can afford to give general admission pass for free. We have 10 incredible speakers every single year, and those speakers just talk to whatever struggles police spouses are going through, police families, whether it's, we have Nick Daughtry from Financial Cop is coming on to just
Another
talk.
great guy.
Awesome. Talk about, budgeting, pensions, you name it. He's talking about it financial wise. We've got Doug White. He came on last year, was one of our number one watched interviews ever. And he is a retired police officer, but he talks about his story and how he almost ended his life, but his wife is really the one that kind of carried him through everything. And so there's a lot of speakers this year that are talking about, and this just kind of happened naturally, but just talking about how the marriage was what they needed to focus on, and that is what carried them through, is their spouse is what carried them through. And so just great pieces of information about communication, about parenting, you name it, we talk about it. And so, again, April 20th to 24th, general admission pass is free. We will have the link. You can go to my website, proudpolicewife.com, and see the little link for the 2026 virtual conference. But we'll also provide it for you, Betsy, so you can share it in the description, so that people can sign up. And we also have incredible giveaways too. So to get the giveaways, all you have to do is be registered for the conference. And I pick just random generator, excuse me. And we have swag bags from Galls. We have boxes from Shield Box. We have coin clubs from Precinct Collectors Club. We have just tons and tons of giveaways. And so people can win those by, registering as well. So it's going to be a really, really awesome time full of tools and support. And one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is, yes, most of the time it's the spouses watching, but I have so many spouses that will message me after and say, look, I watched this video. My, spouse, husband, whomever, wife listened, who's the officer, heard me listening and joined in and listened with me. And now we're having these conversations. And so it opens the door
That's
sometimes.
huge. Yeah,
It's huge.
huge.
It opens the door for these couples to realize, like, wow, like we last year we have Dave Grossman on, and he was phenomenal, and officers loved listening to him, and it just was that gateway for them to have now conversations with their spouse, and just helping marriages, and I love that. That's my favorite part of it all.
That's fantastic. And if you're watching this after the conference is over, definitely go to the website and start planning for next year. Because
Yes,
again, this is an annual event. Rebecca, tell everybody where they can find you, all the places they can find you.
Honestly, just type in Proud Police Wife Rebecca on Google and it'll bring up my website. Instagram is Proud P Wife, but you type in Proud Police Wife, it'll still come up. TikTok, Facebook. I have a podcast, Proud Police Wife. I have a devotional called Proud Police Wife, 90 Devotions Behind the Badge. So just type in Proud Police Wife and all of that will come up. All my resources and social media is where you can find me.
That is so awesome. You are literally doing God's work, and we so appreciate it. I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.